What's going on? Welcome one. What's going on? Welcome all to In the AM with MC. This is going to be a platform where we discuss sports each and every day. Episodes will be released in the morning. We'll try to shoot 3 episodes per week. That's the goal. But if you don't know me, it's good. Michael Codrington, and how about I describe myself, man? I'm a Brooklynite to the bone. I live out Texas now, but I'm a Brooklyn guy. From Brooklyn. I already said that. I went to school in Massachusetts and Washington D.C. So been around the way. Been a sports guy my whole life. I got 2 older brothers who, we used to eat, sleep, and breathe sports. Even my sisters love sports in their own respective ways, but also in our ways as well. Like my younger sister played basketball. She plays a lot of like video games, like sport video games. And my older sister she did a lot of dance, and like performing arts when she was younger. And she used to throw that boomerang. Shout out Candace. She got a picture of her throwing a boomerang when she went to Australia. Uh, but I have a podcast, the Polaroid podcast, which is available on all podcast platforms. I'm an educator during the daytime. And that's enough about me, man. We're here to talk sports. These episodes will only be like half an hour, and it'll just be straight sports. This is the kind of thing you could listen to in the house, you could listen to in the car, you could listen to at work, just to pass the time. So let's just get into it. I would love to in the future welcome some callers, welcome some people to come in and talk to me about these sports in the ways that I know them, in the ways that I would like to talk about them. That being said, we're gonna get right into the first topic. First topic today: the transfer portal. We're talking about the portal today. Let's really talk about the portal, because I'm young enough to where everyone's presentation back in the day, when it was like, what presentation are you going to do, was, should student athletes get paid or not? That was always the big thing that we discussed in school. And I was always somebody who said yes. I'm not saying that they don't need to be paid, but what I am saying is that this has gotten out of control. So the first designation I want to make when we talk about the transfer portal is the transfer portal as we know it versus the NIL transfer portal. So college football does everything how they want to do it. And then there's a trickle down in college athletics to the extent that other sports can compete in the trickle down. So for example, women's softball can't operate the way that college football operates, but a lot of things that they do mimic what college football does, portal wise, money wise, allocation wise, as far as resources. Now, the transfer portal is not what I think is the quote unquote issue. I like the concept of transferring. I like the idea of second chances. I like the idea of finding whatever you're looking for somewhere else. I like seeing people. I think Haley Van Lith is a great example. Just off the top of my head, Van Lith was a phenomenal player for Louisville. She played a year at LSU, didn't work out the way she wanted to, and now she's back. She's at TCU, finishing her career. I like the way Van Lith went about it. I think that even when she had opportunities to speak poorly about Kim Mulkey in public, or about maybe what she was sold on versus what LSU really was, she never did that. She played basketball. She landed on her feet somewhere else, and now she's kind of re-improved her draft stock. I like that. And she's also got some degrees to her name. That's another big thing. Credits, okay? The transfer portal usually, or before the floodgates were open, prioritized graduates and credits. There was a player, Nogel Eastern, I think he went to Purdue, and he was supposed to play at Howard the year that we had McCord Maker. And the reason he couldn't transfer is because his credits did not transfer. That's not something that you would see at a lot of schools. I mean, Howard's a mid-major, right? I'm not saying that we're an SEC school, but we prioritized our credits. And you can come if you have the credits. That's why even now most of our transfers are Ivy League guys, because they're grad transfers, they have credits, or they have degrees. One thing that cannot be overstated about the portal is that there is a myriad of young men who mostly, but also a lot of women, but specifically young men, who are starting their college journey and not receiving college degrees. I'm going to say that again. There are a lot of young men who are starting their college journeys, but not receiving college degrees. That's the last thing you want. I mean, if you're transferring school to school to school to school, you want something to show for it. And luckily, a lot of the people I've talked to who have transferred and done those things have been able to graduate, but it's not always on the kid. And that's something that we need to understand. A lot of times the schools are not going the extra mile to make sure, hey, let's make sure that you're on track to graduate. How many people really genuinely care about that? A lot of coaches, head coaches, would rather send that to compliance and make that compliance his issue. And compliance is doing what they're paid to do, but also, there's a lot of politics and all of that with compliance that I'm not really going to get into right now. The next point that's really married to this one is about the mid majors. So speaking of a school like Howard, right? We had a point guard, Elijah Hawkins. Elijah Hawkins currently plays point guard for the Texas Tech Red Raiders, and he leads the Big 12 in assists per game. Elijah Hawkins was a very, very talented high school player. And I think the only reason he landed up by us is because of his height. He was about 5'9", but he played for DeMatha Catholic. You're not going to tell me a guy at DeMatha can't play high D1 basketball, who's checking. I mean, name somebody. I mean, he was checking everybody in high school, excuse me. And then at Howard, his first 2 years, he was balling for us, and he helped us win the conference. I would have loved to have Elijah Hawkins for 4 years. I'm sure it would have been really cool to see him rewrite all of our records and have records that are almost unbreakable because of 4 years of Elijah Hawkins. But Minnesota threw him some money, played for Minnesota, and then Texas Tech threw him more money than Minnesota. So what you now have is all these conferences that were doing pay-for-play under the table that are now doing pay-for-play shamelessly over the table. And what I don't want to happen to a school like Howard is what's happening at a lot of schools like UAB. Trent Dilfer just discussed this, right? You have a good year, and there are certain colleges that are targeting your roster. I know that you can not even rehabilitate, but you can get these kids, you can develop these kids to a point that now they're ready for me. Now they're ready for Steve Sarkisian. Now they're ready for Matt Rule. Now they're ready for these SEC and football, Big 10, Big 12. Now they're ready for these other schools, but to the tune of $800,000, to the tune of $1 million, to the tune of these insane things that kids are signing their name on the dotted line. That's oh man, that's another area you really want to go, because what is a kid, right? In college basketball, when they would say this kid's a true freshman, that would always stick with me, because I didn't understand red shirts, just like the average fan doesn't understand red shirts and gray shirts and all that. I didn't understand red shirts and such. So someone says this kid's a true freshman, right? That used to mean this person is 17, 18, maybe 19, wet behind the ears. Like, this is a true, Cooper Flagg's a true freshman. Cooper Flagg, for whatever the discourse is around Flagg, I really love watching him play because it's the organic nature to the fact that he's a true, real high school freshman. He didn't do all the jumping around. He's the right age. He makes freshman mistakes. He plays freshman basketball, but he also plays beyond that, which is why he's being so highly coveted and considered. Nowadays, a true freshman is 23-year-old kid who might be signed to the school, signed to the school. You're not signed. You're not a student first. You're an athlete first now, officially. And you can argue that most of them had to be athletes first before. That's not the argument that I'm trying to make as far as a counter argument. But now, I can't remember the name of the coach of Tennessee, but basketball coach of Tennessee, but maybe Rick Barnes. But he got into some hot water because he told a kid, if you're not going to do what you're paid to do, sit on the bench. What does that sound like? If you're not going to do what you're paid to do, get away from me. I want nothing to do with you. What message does that send? A lot of these players are getting terrible advice from their associates. I'm hearing, stuff, they're taking 18, 20% of the contracts. That's not reflective of the professional market. If the goal of NIL is for some of these people to receive financial literacy and things of that nature, what's financially literate about some Joe Schmo off the street taking a quarter of what you've gotten from the school? That's not reflective of what would happen at the professional level. And then these kids are similar to a lot of college professional athletes when they first sign. You just see the news. So let's say my brother or my cousin just signed a $2 million NIL deal, but I don't know that they only take home X amount, or that $2 million is spread out, dispersed in this way. Whoop-de-whoop. But now everyone sees you have $2 million in the news or on Twitter, on three. Everyone sees you have $2 million. So guess what? They People are gonna start asking for some money. And it's probably not gonna go the way that you anticipate, you know. Um, I had some great discussions with some of my fellow coaches. I'm a coach as well. Some of my fellow coaches about how mid-major teams cannot build, right? Even if you are a mid-major team with what's called an NIL collective, okay? You can't offer what Ohio State wants to offer your kid. You just had an All-American wide receiver. Hey, we love you. You're the top earning guy on our team. We're gonna run it back. We're gonna give you for $50,000 a year. Ohio State picks up the phone and says, "Hey, we want to give you $300,000 to play the safety position, or play the receiver position for us. $300,000. You're not the top earner at Ohio State, right? That's the quarterback. But what do you say to that? What do you realistically say when that happens? And everyone says, this isn't happening. Yes, it is. It's happening right before our eyes. The coaches are telling us they're not. You can see in a press conference when a coach is trying to hold their tongue about that kind of thing out of respect for another coach, or maybe to maybe to get out of a potential fine. But they know what's going on, and we cannot be naive anymore. We know what's going on. I think that the portal should not die like at all. But I think regulations are good for any system. So, am I the commissioner? No. Yeah, this is my official commissioner application. So, one, windows. Just like for recruiting, you have contact periods and dead periods. We need windows. So we need during these 15 days, during these 19 days, you can do this. But it gets out of hand, right? I think that the committee needs to prioritize graduating students. So there needs to be some kind of penalty if you are making a move that would hinge on or impede on your ability to graduate on time. Now, that's an unpopular rule, right? Because everyone's goal in college is not necessarily to graduate, but then that therein lies a bigger issue, right? You don't want people to be coming to college to make money in college. That might sound counterintuitive. It's like you just said this about paying players. Sure, paying players, paying other, like you're paying them for labor, but you don't want them to aspire to go to a place of education to earn the money. The school is the school. The university is the university, and these people are making money for the school. But again, it's about the precedent that you set or don't set. I've mentioned how transferring is also happening in women's sports at a much lower clip because it's not advantageous to a lot of the people. A lot of people who aren't familiar with women's basketball might think that Angel Reese transferred from Maryland to LSU because LSU was better or because LSU gave her money. It's not the case. She got injured at Maryland, and then there was some stuff going on with the coaches there and with her and her camp. So she said, "I want to transfer," and then she wanted to go into the SEC because she wanted that level of competition. So there was a world where she goes to South Carolina, right? Like there's a world where maybe she goes to Florida or Ole Miss. She happened to go to LSU. LSU happened to be supercharged top to bottom. She became the biggest star in women's college basketball through that, alongside Caitlin Clark. And that's just what happened to happen. Um, and the storyline is beautiful, but that's one of the reasons why they were able to have such a big draw last year. They had like 20 million people watch the game because the storyline is so good and organic. Iowa is full of local recruits who are from the area who might maybe wanted to go to UConn, but Gino didn't come out, like they talk about Caitlin Clark and then LSU's story is great. South Carolina, Dawn Staley's ability to develop her talent. How many mid-major coaches can say, "Hey, I got to develop my talent. I keep my talent and develop them, and then we had success." You don't get to, and then when you do see mid majors go up against bigger schools, sometimes it does irk me when it's like it looks like the playing field is even because it's like this mid major has all these transfers from all these bigger name schools, but in reality, they're not. They're taking the spots of maybe like a local person who wants to go to that school or somebody who would go there and not leave. A lot of these people treat the mid-major schools as a rehabilitative process almost as if it's a junior college. I've seen people do it. Oh, yeah, I'm at Howard. Last year I was at this school, but I'm here so that next year I can be at this school. As opposed to, thank you for the opportunity. I'm here. I'm bought in. And maybe that's naive of me to think that people can kind of go back along that lines of thinking when you consider commits, because at the end of the day, it's about self-interest, right? What are we interested in? You know, what do we care about? So I guess I say all that to say you can't make people care, right? Um, so that's my spiel on the portal. Okay. That's my spiel on the portal. Now, I'm going to briefly talk about the New York Yankees. I'm going to talk about Coach Prime, and that'll be episode 1 of In the AM with MC. So let's talk about the New York Yankees. The New York Yankees are a historic franchise, and I don't watch baseball all day. You know, I don't sit there and turn on baseball. But I do love the Yankees, and I do love the fact that Aaron Judge is doing things that I've never, ever, ever seen somebody do in my life. It would break my heart if we ever found out he cheated the game or anything, because his story is beautiful too. This guy's 25 when he breaks into the MLB, just hitting moonshots, and his numbers historically don't really add up because again he was 25 and he's 6'7", 282. This is not a guy who's going to fly around the bases, doesn't have a ton of stolens. Batting average can be hit or miss. Obviously, he struggled to perform in the playoffs. But when he hit that one home run against the Guardians, I mean, I've never been more patriotic in my life. I was standing there saluting the Yankees, man. I mean, he hit that homer. He hit that homer. And I still remember when we got Giancarlo Stanton on the team as well. And I say all that to say that the window is definitely closing. What the Yankees have done to rebuild their roster in the aftermath of Juan Soto leaving is beautiful because it shows that they care. It shows that the higher ups understand that the window is closing. But again, it's closing. It's closing. You signed Garrett Cole a couple years ago, that big deal off his side. I think he got a Cy Young either for them that next year or was off of Cy Young. You signed Aaron Judge, that monsters deal. Giancarlo's only got a couple more years smacking the ball like how he currently is. We made some acquisitions. But you saw Anthony Rizzo kind of fall off a cliff this past year. I remember when he was still really, really good for us. I still remember when he helped the Cubs win. Window is closing. I think that the discourse around Aaron Boone being the manager is warranted in the sense that he has some games he'd like to take back, some decisions he'd like to take back. But that's what happens when you're the coach of a team you played for. You either have a lot of leeway or you have a lot less leeway when it's a team you played for, because everyone's like, well, you should figure this out. And I'm interested to see if Mike Vrabel goes through this for the Patriots, because now he's going to go coach a team he played for. But when you coach a team that you played for, there's a lot of we trust you, and especially at the beginning, we trust you. You have our best interest at heart. You're going to go coach this team. But what if it goes south? And I think that's why Deion Sanders did not want to go coach Florida State. Of course he could go coach at Florida State. It's Deion Sanders. Are we serious? People were like, oh, Florida State didn't want him over Norvell. They wanted Deion. Of course they wanted Deion Sanders. But I think Sanders is smart enough to understand that they hate you when they hate you, and they love you when they love you when you go and coach for a team that you played for as an athlete, especially if you set a high bar. And Prime set bars that have still not been eclipsed by anybody. I think this year is a promising year for the Yankees. The Dodgers are just too good. I mean, I don't like the way that they're doing their whole backload with the money. I don't know enough. I'm not in the know enough about that economically to speak on that. But I think that there's got to be something done if they're getting all of these guys on these monstrous deals. But it seems like they're not paying them all concurrently. That there's got to be something done about that. Mike Vick received the coaching job at Norfolk State University, Newport News, Virginia 757. Mike Vick is one of the great sons of Newport News. Him and Allen Iverson are kind of known as the King and King Jr. of Newport News. So he was hired out there. And not long after that, Deshaun Jackson was hired as the head coach for the Delaware State Hornets. Let's talk about this one. I don't know where you were when Coach Prime was hired to coach for Jackson State, but I think that everybody kind of had the same Immediate reaction, a question mark. Deion Sanders, who was on TV a lot, right, was coaching his sons play high school in Texas. And Shiloh played a year for South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. And then Deion said, you know what? Shador, who was committed to Florida Atlantic University, he said, you know what? Shador, I'm going to go coach and you're going to come play for me. And we're going to go sign the number one guy out of high school, Travis Hunter. What a masterclass, right? The way that he burst onto the scene is unprecedented, the second to none. And he spoke a lot of prophecies kind of in the air. My good friend and good buddy Makai Abbott, he has a great article about Deion's tenure at Jackson State and the ways in which he might have misled the fan base and all that. I think there's a lot of validity and merit to that. But what I'll say is that Deion is one of the few players who he's so successful as a player and has had such a squeaky clean public life, right? The biggest things that when you think about what Deion has done publicly that's negative or has been like highlighted that's negative, outside of his ex-wife being caught up in her cult stuff, you don't hear about Deion in any kind of negative capacity. So he had such a squeaky clean resume. He could kind of do anything. If he woke up and was like, I want to go be a pastor, no one in the church is going to say, nah, you can't do that. Right. And he leads with religion in a way that can be very captivating. He's a very good public speaker. There's a lot of things to like, a lot of checkboxes, a lot that Prime brought to Jackson State. And that's why there's a lot that he took when he left Jackson State. So I was skeptical of his move initially, and then he started to kind of play it out. And I was pro Prime, and he brought his son, and he brought the number one recruit in the country to Jackson State, to a smaller HBCU that had a very storied football legacy that was kind of looking for a little bit of rejuvenation. That's all of that stuff about Prime. One thing that never gets talked about enough is that Coach Prime is 0-3 in bowl games as a coach. He lost the Celebration Bowl not once but twice. They did not lose a game in the SWAC, but when they got to bowl season, both years in a row they lost. First year they got clobbered. The second year it was they had to come back to keep tying it up, and then they lost in OT. But this past year they looked abysmal. Colorado looked abysmal when they played BYU. They didn't have any opt-outs outside of their middle linebacker, and they looked rough. So I am concerned about Deion being 0-3 in bowl games as a head coach, but that's neither here nor there. Eddie George has done a phenomenal job at Tennessee State. Those are two guys who kind of similar when you think about football legend to HBCU coach pipeline. Michael Vick's hire makes a lot of sense. Okay. Michael Vick constantly looking to repair his reputation after what happened to him. He's appeared on TV numerous times. He's done a phenomenal job on TV. I believe he might still be getting kind of like iced out of like the Hall of Fame and all that. I'm not too privy on that. I do know he's about to get initiated into the College Football Hall of Fame class of 2025. So that shows that as a society, we're kind of moving towards, forgiving Vic, welcoming Vic in a different way. But I've heard him talk X's and O's on TV. He knows what he's talking about in a way that he can help his team on all sides. That whole leader of men nonsense. I think he's that. He's also a hometown guy, 757. The problem with Vic signing is precedent. Once again, Michael Vick never has coached a day in his life, and he rolled out the bed and decided he wanted to go coach somewhere, and he was immediately given a yes and $400,000 as a base salary with incentives. Their last coach, Coach Odoms, was receiving a fraction of that. I think he got somewhere in the 220, 225 ballpark. It would be great if Howard had their salary for Coach Scott public because they're a private university, they don't have to disclose. But in the MEAC, most coaches are making anywhere between $175,000 to $225,000 a year as a base salary coaching football. Now you bring in these quote unquote celebrity guys who will undoubtedly bring eyes to the sport from a media standpoint, but who might not be equipped to coach these guys in the first go around. You can't compare every situation. Teddy Bridgewater, in his situation, their team has superior players to a lot of the teams they play, first of all. Second of all, he was in their shoes not too long ago. And third of all, we watched his maturation in real time on camera. Every video we ever saw of him coaching that team, you watch the maturation. And it's not like I'm judging someone's pedagogy or how unorthodox they may or may not be. I don't know how Vic is going to coach the team. I don't know how he's going to go about practice and filling out his staff in the day-to-day. But I don't like the fact that this unproven person is coming into a conference that was previously full of many proven men and still has some proven men who are being scapegoated, like a Lee Hole, for example. I'm going to get to Delaware State. And you're receiving significantly more. And they even have an incentive if he wins the national championship. You think he's going to win the FCS national championship? That's blasphemy. It's blasphemy. It's a slap in the face to all of the coaches in the MEAC and all of the hardworking individuals who sought out HBCU jobs and not considered them a stepping stone or considered them the job in the backyard. So I support Vic. I hope that he has a good time. I hope that Norfolk State restores itself to the powerhouseness that they have that had been mid to early 2010s. But I don't like that precedent at all. I think, again, it's very unfair. That being said, Deshaun Jackson's number hasn't been publicly announced to anybody, but Deshaun Jackson is going around on his media tour with his HBCU varsity jacket. I needed this and blah, 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 blah. Mr. Jackson, Mr. I dropped the football before I score a touchdown. Mr. I'm going to publicly beef with anybody on the planet. Mr. I'm on my podcast talking out my mouth sideways. When I said all that stuff about Prime, Deshaun Jackson is not the same way. Deshaun Jackson is not a guy who, when you think about rapport and character, someone goes, that guy's a coach. And he said it out his own mouth. I watched a clip of him on the Breakfast Club, and he said, oh, I never saw myself coaching. One of my buddies just called me and said, do you want this job? We should all know less about each other. We should all keep our mouths closed because anybody could tell you that's how you got that job, Mr. Jackson. Anybody could tell you that. But the fact that you're telling us that that's how you got that job, you better hope you can coach your tail off. You know, Delaware State is an uphill battle of a job because Delaware State as a school is hardly majority black, even though it's historically black. Delaware is not very black. And you look at the options for college around there, it's kind of scarce. So a lot of white people do go to Delaware State, right? That's something that, like, as far as knowing the school, I doubt that Deshaun Jackson has done any research on the school, the position that they have or have not been in the MEAC. I doubt he's done any of that research. But it's such a frustrating thing to talk about because you have so much love and you know so many people with so much love for the HBCU game and so much respect for it. And to, again, hire this person who was off his couch, never coached in his life, doesn't understand the dynamics. There's too much here to poke at and be like, I don't like this. Deshaun Jackson is going to have to grow as a human being if he's going to be a successful coach. And that's just what that is. If he's not successful, then what is Delaware State going to do? That's my question to them. I hope the best for them. But again, if you ain't Bison, all right. Thank y'all for listening to the first and inaugural episode of In the AM with MC. This is one of many. Ciao.